welcome to the program. I'm Joke Rogers. South Africa's Justice Ministry has confirmed that the man who killed the South African anti-apartheid hero Chris Hani has been released on parole. Last month's decision by the Constitutional Court to free Janus Wallace drew widespread criticism in South Africa. Mr. Hani's widow describes it as diabolical. The hugely popular senior member of the ANC's military wing was shot dead in 1993, but it was a failed attempt to stop the country changing from white minority rule to democratic rule. Last week, Mr. Wallace received treatment in a prison hospital after he was stabbed by a fellow inmate. Rwanda's foreign minister has accused the international community of exacerbating the crisis in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, which has been plagued by armed groups after the United States urged Kigali to stop any supposed support for the rebels. In a call with Rwandan President Paul Kagame, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken made it clear that all external support to non-state armed groups in the DRC must end, including Rwanda's support for M23. Fighting in eastern DRC between government forces and rebels from the M23, a former Tutsi rebellion, has heightened tensions with neighboring Rwanda, which the DRC accuses of encouraging the militia. Kigali denies any involvement. In a press release, the Rwandan Minister of Foreign Affairs, Vincent Biruta, confirmed that Paul Kagame and Antony Blinken had good exchanges, but that differences remain on the understanding of the problem. Rwanda has repeatedly blamed the crisis in the eastern DRC on authorities in Kinshasa and accused the international community of turning a blind eye to its supposed support for the Democratic Forces for the Liberation of Rwanda, FDLR, a movement of Rwandan Hutu rebels, some of whom were involved in the 1994 Tutsi genocide. A November 23 summit in Angola ordered a ceasefire followed by the withdrawal of rebels from positions captured in recent months, but no withdrawal has been observed to date. After a 5-day truce, heavy arms fighting resumed last week in eastern DRC between the M23 and the Congolese army, which accused the rebels of massacring about 300 civilians. The M23 rejected these accusations and called for an independent investigation into it. Meanwhile, the M23 rebel group says it's ready to withdraw from occupied territories in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo and will support regional peacemaking efforts despite not being represented in talks. The M23 spokesman Lawrence Kanyuka said in a statement that the Tutsi-led armed group is ready to start disengagement and withdrawal on Tuesday. However, continuing clashes taking place between Congolese troops and M23 fighters near Goma in North Kivu province are being reported still. M23, which is leading an offensive in eastern DRC, which Kinshasa describes as terrorist movement, had previously said it could not cooperate with measures agreed at talks from which it was excluded. Yesterday, Kanyuka also requested a meeting with the regional East African Community Force to discuss modalities and renewed its request for a meeting with the mediator, Kenya's ex-president Uhuru Kenyatta. And the third round of the inter-Congolese talks on peace in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo concluded with the former Kenyan president and talks facilitator Uhuru Kenyatta calling on the foreign troops to leave the DRC. Eastern Congo has been facing another insurgency by the M23, a Tutsi-led rebel group whose latest resurgence this year has caused a major diplomatic crisis. Mr. Kenyatta told delegates from various armed groups and civil society organizations that he would urge leaders of the East African community to work towards withdrawing their fighters from the East. Delegates signed a communique outlining various agreements, including funding a demobilization campaign. The DRC's President Felix Tshisekedi sent his special envoy, Serge Shibangu, on his behalf.
We are happy with the progress. We are not saying we have completed everything, but we have managed to achieve some milestones in terms of specific issues that either will be undertaken by the government of the Democratic Republic of Congo and other aspects that will be completed by some of the delegates that are here.
Let's get more on this. Let's talk to security expert David Otto, who joins us via Zoom from London. David, welcome to Network Africa.
Thank you.
So why do you think the M23 has finally agreed to withdraw from occupied territories?
I think there could be several reasons, but I could just give you three. I think, first of all, the M23 is facing a battlefield pressure. We know that the Congolese has increased, the presence of the military. We also know that the EAC, that's the East African Community, and countries like Kenya have deployed some forces in that region to have some kind of a military presence. So there is a pressure coming on the ground, on the battlefield, that M23 is facing that it did not expect or face before. I think the second point is that regionally, there is a very strong push from regional leaders, Angola, from as we heard from Uhuru Kenyatta, who is the former president of Kenya. He has been pushing for a peace process, calling on all sides to come to the table. So there is a regional pressure which has been applied on M23. But I think the last, and the most important has been the pressure from the international community and the US, Foreign Secretary, Anthony Blinken saying very straightforward to the Rwandan government that, they should stop, arming the M23, which is a clear indication, as one could ever imagine, that, US is accusing Rwanda of arming the rebels, and therefore Rwanda should stop arming the rebels. So I think M23 is losing grounds, and if the people that are supporting it, like Rwanda, are backing off, then they have no choice, but for the spokesman Lawrence Kanyuka to say, time is up, let's go for disengagement and withdrawal.
So the M23 is just one of the rebel groups operating in the DRC and in the region. So what happens to the other rebel groups?
They are one of the groups, as you rightly said, but they're one of the most powerful as well. The previous negotiations that were held in Nairobi, the Nairobi Accord, listed about 100 and something groups that operate within that region. And we've got to be, make it very clear here that it's not just Rwanda and DRC that are experiencing problems with armed groups, but also Rwanda and Uganda. And some of the rebel groups, also have, extensions, towards Tanzania, towards Angola. So it's quite extensive, and so many groups operate in that region. So this is not just, a situation where it would just involve, the M23, because of course, the M23 were not even part, of that Nairobi Accord. So they're just calling, they're literally begging to be part of the negotiation process. So it will not just be a matter of, looking at one group, but again, the M23 has been the biggest elephant in the room as far as insecurity in that region is concerned.
How effective is the DRC government's control over its territorial security, in your opinion?
It's very, very, they've got very little control, especially when it comes to the northern part of Kivu, and that is where most of the fighting has been taking place, most of the territories that the M23 rebels have occupied, and they have said, they will let go some of these territories. So maybe, if negotiations, are successful, then we would see the DRC having access to some, or if not most of the territories that it controls. Congo is a very massive country, and you can imagine what it would take, for the DRC to be able to have territorial control in all those areas. But at least if there were some kind of a negotiation with M23, and of course, as you rightly said, other rebel groups, then of course, that is a step towards, some level of territorial control. But whether they will have all control is something that one needs to watch and see.
So there are other countries in the sub-region who have interest in the DRC. Indeed, some had troops in there, including Zimbabwe, Angola, and Rwanda. But there seems to be something particular about Rwanda's interest. What do you think this could be?
Yes, you rightly mentioned, and also we have, troops from Kenya as well. I think previously when there was an attack in Uganda, in the capital, Kampala, the Ugandan government decided to collaborate with the DRC government and send some troops, into DRC. So, Congo is a country that, is extremely, I have to use that word, deliberately rich in terms of mineral resources. And, Rwanda seems to be capitalizing, as he's been accused by the Congolese government on some of those resources. Now, I think what is very clear is that, countries behave like human beings. They sometimes, want to benefit from others, or survive through others. I mean, that's how perhaps, Rwanda does. But again, we have to be clear that the Rwanda government has denied that, one, it supports the M23, and secondly, that it does, feeds off the mineral resources in DRC Congo. But, the bottom line is that, every country in that region has, an eye on the resources, from DRC Congo. And Uganda has been accused previously and continuously by DRC Congo of exploiting or exploring some of its mineral resources. So it's not different from what is happening with Rwanda or perhaps, other countries that are looking towards DRC Congo and saying, I've got to, lay my hands on some of those resources.
Right. So talking about resources, you hit the nail. DRC seems to be suffering from a minerals-rich curse, and this has been exacerbated by significantly poor governance. Its first prime minister was assassinated within 2 weeks of assuming office, followed by over 2 years of Mobutu Sese Seko. Is there significant change in the situation now?
I would doubt it. I think many, Congolese, as they call themselves, would think that, with the presence of, the M23 and other rebel groups, and also a lot of foreign interests, both regional and external partners, eyeing the resources in DRC, there seems to be no changes. I mean, again, as you rightly said, this is a good example of resource curse. I mean, DRC is so rich and yet so unstable, being destabilized by the presence of its rich soil. But again, it has to do with leadership, and it becomes very difficult for a country like Congo to be able to hold itself internally, because of course its neighbors somehow eyeing on what it's got, and that's the very unfortunate situation that Congo finds itself. But I think if there is some regional understanding, then perhaps these resources could be shared in a much more better way, in a way that doesn't bring instability.
Right. Security expert David Otto, thank you for your time today on Network Africa.
Thank you.
Still ahead on the program. Morocco erupts in ecstasy after historic World Cup win and a quarter-final qualification. Welcome back. Kenya's health ministry is set to launch a 2-week vaccination campaign against measles, targeting 1.2 million children aged between 9 months and 5 years. It follows an outbreak in 7 counties where 90% of children below 5 years have missed out on the 2-dose vaccine. The ongoing drought has made it difficult for health workers to give children this life-saving vaccine due to the movement of people from one place to another in search of food and water. The ministry has not disclosed how many cases and deaths have been reported, but is urging parents and guardians to ensure their children get vaccinated to contain the outbreak. Measles is a highly contagious disease characterized by high fever and a rash. The vaccination coverage has steadily declined globally since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. The campaign will begin on Friday and end on December 18th. The UN Refugee Agency says tens of thousands of people have sought shelter in recent weeks at Kenya's Dadaab camps, forced from their homes by extremist violence in neighboring Somalia and unrelenting drought. According to UNHCR spokesperson Boris Chesirokov, an estimated 24,000 people have arrived at the camp complex since the end of September, some of the more than 80,000 taken in there in the past 2 years. He adds that in spite of a recent drop in daily arrivals at Dadaab, an arid outpost in northeast Kenya, adequate space in the camps is running out. Help has been provided to the new arrivals, including clean drinking water and extended sanitation and hygiene facilities on the outskirts.
More than 80,000 people have arrived in Kenya's Dadaab refugee camps. The majority have arrived over the past 2 years, fleeing ongoing insecurity in Somalia and the unrelenting drought, the longest and most severe in decades. A cholera outbreak has been affecting refugee and host communities. Over 350 cases have been identified since the end of October. Those have mainly affected children. In one area that UNHCR teams recently visited, a family was hosting up to 28 people. 8 of them had already been infected. Treatment centers need more personnel and supplies to help curb any further spread of disease.
And Somalia's army and allied militias have pushed the alshabab fighters out of a strategic town in the center of the country that had been held by the Islamist militant group for 6 years. In recent months, the government has retaken control of dozens of villages and towns. A combination of American airstrikes, African Union troops, the Somali army, and an allied militia are causing serious problems for the group. The mayor of Aden Yabal says the town was taken without encountering any resistance. The jihadist group had used it as a training base and a hub for its operations across central Somalia. After President Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud's election in May, he declared an all-out war against al-Shabaab. Now he says the effort to clear the group out of Hirshabelle and Galmudug states is in its final stages. Despite losing territory, the militant group has been carrying out frequent deadly bombing raids, especially in the capital, Mogadishu. A Mozambican court has sentenced the son of a former president and others to prison for their role in the tuna bonds corruption scandal. Ex-President Armando Guebuza's son, Ndambi Guebuza, and 2 former heads of intelligence, Gregorio Leo and Antonio de Rosario, each got 12 years behind bars. 8 of their co-accused were convicted and sentenced to between 10 and 12 years. The crimes committed have brought consequences whose effects will last for generations. A total of 19 people had been charged with the blackmail, embezzlement and money laundering over their alleged roles in Mozambique's biggest financial scandal. 8 have been acquitted for lack of evidence. And Mali's transitional leader, Colonel Assimi Goïta, says the future of the UN mission in Mali will depend on a change of strategy and improved relations with the country's army. Colonel Goïta tweeted that he had held discussions with the UN head of peacekeeping operations, Jean-Pierre Lacroix, who has been on a 2-day tour of Mali ahead of the renewal of MINUSMA's mandate. The state-linked letter quoted Mr. Lacroix as saying that this was about ensuring that there was an agreement between Mali and the UN so that when the time comes, the recommendations at the level of the UN Security Council are in line with the objectives of the Malian authorities. UN peacekeepers have been in the country since 2013, but relations with Bamako have recently deteriorated. Several countries, including Germany and Cote d'Ivoire, have announced plans to withdraw from the mission or scale down their presence. And to the environment, here in Nigeria, there's a renewed warning that the double jeopardy of flood disaster and desertification now pose a threat to the country's 2065 zero hunger and food sufficiency target if nothing is done to reverse the rate of indiscriminate depletion of the nation's forest reserves. This is coming from the African Union Development Agency, which is collaborating with a new partnership for Africa's development to revolutionize agriculture on the continent. The representatives of the organizations and their partners made the call during a visit to the Benue State Governor, Samuel Ortom, where they discussed the effects of the recent flooding and climate change on the activities of farmers.
Farmers across Nigeria suffered various losses between September and October 2022 as a result of floods in Benue, where the now shallow and silted river left many in distress. In what appears to be a double jeopardy, the River Benue is now shallow a few weeks after the floodwaters receded as a result of climate change, while states like Niger, Bauchi, and Gombe are all battling with desertification as a result of the indiscriminate tree felling, a situation that led to this urgent meeting of experts from Elder NEPAD, a collaboration between the African Union Development Agency and New Partnership for Africa's Development with Governor Samuel Otto. Governor Otto, who commenced the initiative to improve farm practices with investment in land restoration, wants the experts to look into food storage and processing.
Most importantly, processing has been a very major challenge. But we can turn it into gold mine. We can attract investors because not many people are into it. And investing in processing, we give our people the opportunity of adding value to their economy. It will engage them and also keep them busy and even reduce the rate of insecurity in our country.
It's not every day that you get August vistas, and the governor honors them with traditional Benue fabrics.
Disaster in the entire world. We all know this to be true, but we don't notice it because it happens little by little by little. So the world is changing. If we're going to solve this problem, we as a world have to work together. No nation can do this alone.
In implementing this project, Benue State is one of the key states because of what it's known for. So partnership with them and having the investors come into Benue State to work with the people is a revolution of development and economic growth.
What we're looking for is sustainable development for the smallholder farmers so that they become independent in the form that we provide the initial resources, education, training, and soil amendments that are required in order to get their crop production, harvest production to almost double. And that's what we're trying to do, and create those yields that are necessary for smallholder farmer independence, smallholder farmer increased livelihood, and train them so that they'll be able to do this on a go-forward basis.
After the 2022 flood disaster that left many farmlands washed away, aid agencies and the federal government have stepped up efforts to avert food crisis by boosting better farm practices ahead of the 2023 farming season.
As you can see, there probably would have been no sleep for those jubilant fans of Morocco who poured into the streets, major streets of the country after they reached the World Cup quarterfinals for the first time. The Atlas Lions stunned Spain 3-0 in a shootout after a goalless draw. They will face Portugal on Saturday at 3 p.m. Flares were set off and flags waved in the streets of the capital, Rabat, as cheering, singing and drumming continued deep into the night. Qataris, South Asians and other supporters joined Moroccans in celebrating their team's victory over Spain. Hundreds marched in an impromptu parade at Doha Souk with the Moroccan fans chanting "Morocco forever" to the beat of drums. Morocco is the first Arabic-speaking country to reach the quarterfinals of the World Cup in Qatar, the first held in an Arab country as well. They became only the fourth African nation to reach the last 8 of the tournament, 12 years after Ghana did so in South Africa.
Today I am very happy, and Arabic people very happy also because the Morocco today win. I hope inshallah Morocco will be in final, inshallah.
Oh, well done, Morocco. Well, that's it on Network Africa. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Jackie Rogers.